name is Samantha Chapman. I am with ABC7 Chicago, and it is an honor to join you all this evening for a extremely important conversation. So thank you and welcome everyone. This is a fireside chat with Chicago City Treasurer Melissa Conyers Ervin and John Rogers of Ariel Investments, two amazing, outstanding individuals. They are truly institutions in Chicago, and we are truly thrilled to have them with us this evening. As part of the Treasurer's Money Smart Week programming, which is designed to provide financial literacy programming to all Chicagoans, tonight's discussion will take on an important topic, and that's building generational wealth. Now, we've heard this a lot. We've heard it, seen posts on social media. We've seen a lot of different discussions, heard a lot of different discussions about building generational wealth. But today, we're going to dig into what that really means. We don't want it to just be a throwaway term that people use. We want to really explain and understand and dissect what it means and how we can attain it, because everybody wants it, right? But what do you have to do? What are the steps you need to take? And I'm confident that our panelists will be able to answer those questions. Of course, we're in the middle of a week of wonderful programming, and I hope you'll be able to tune in tomorrow's webinar on rental and mortgage assistance for Chicago residents. And then we have Saturday's exciting virtual youth FinTech Summit in partnership with Greenwood Project and World Business Chicago. So again, this is a busy week. We want you all to be able to tune into every program. Tomorrow and Saturday, we have more. So we're really excited about this week, and we hope that you are too. You can visit www.chicagocitytreasurer.com/Money Smart Week to register for those events. I know that you all are excited about them, just as I am. And be sure to follow the Chicago City Treasurer Office social media page for regular updates on that. If you are just not sure of what event is taking place, that's a good place for you to check. Now we're going to get right into this discussion, but I want to introduce you to our esteemed panelists. Very important that we outline who they are because they're both two amazing people. So we're going to get to John Rogers. So before he founded Ariel Investments, John Rogers was a kid growing up in Hyde Park on Chicago's South Side. I've got to give a represent to John Rogers because I'm from Hyde Park too. So anytime I hear Hyde Park, my ears just, I love it. Shout out to Hyde Park. He studied economics at Princeton and became the first African-American winner of the Woodrow Wilson Award for his service to the Princeton alumni community, the Chicago community, the African-American community, and of course, the financial community. Mr. Rogers worked as a stockbroker for 2 years before founding Ariel Investments, and he is widely considered as one of the world's most successful investors. Let that sink in. Black man from Chicago, from the South Side, one of the world's most successful investors. We are so happy to hear that. He served as co-chair of President Obama's Presidential Inaugural Committee in 2009, and currently sits on the board of directors for the Obama Foundation. In addition to this, he's a well-decorated individual. In addition to the boards of McDonald's, Nike, and the New York Times Company. Most important, though, he is committed to creating opportunities for other young people to get involved in financial services industry. And we are so, so glad to have him with us today. Mr. Rogers, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, please give a virtual round of applause for us because this is an amazing man. Mr. Rogers, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. And now we are also so thrilled to have Chicago City Treasurer Melissa Conyers Ervin, who is the city's first elected treasurer in 20 years. She is also a South Sider, born on the South Side and was raised on the West Side. Shout out to the West Side. And after obtaining her degree in finance and her MBA, worked in the private sector before answering the call to public service. She represented Illinois' 10th district in the Illinois State House before becoming treasurer in 2019. She is the only elected official to sit on all 4 of the city's pension boards. I'm going to say that again. She is the only elected official to sit on all 4 of the city's pension boards, overseeing a $9 billion portfolio. Check this sister out. And she devotes a significant amount of her time to creating opportunities for Chicago's youth, especially those in underserved neighborhoods, to gain exposure to finance and pursue careers and opportunities in those fields. So Madam Treasurer and Mr. Rogers, we thank you so much. Madam Treasurer, I know you want to say a few words. We thank you. We know you all are busy. These are trying times. We know you all have a lot going on. So the fact that you are willing to shed light on your expertise and how you got to where you are, we thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Samantha. What a wonderful introduction. I don't know about John, but I feel like I need to have you on everything that I do to introduce me.
I got you.
Oh, thank you so very much. You are such a dynamic young woman, and I'm so excited to have you facilitate this evening. And thank you for a moment to speak before we kind of jump into the panel. I did want to acknowledge the recent events and with what happened in the video being released today of the 13-year-old Adam Toledo, who lost his life. And again, we're being able to view that today. And then in the recent weeks with the 20-year-old Dante Wright in Minnesota, recently losing his life, it just reminds me that we need to pray and advocate for our youth. And I want us to not be so quick to judge. I think tonight's panel is a perfect example of how we work together as adults and how we advocate for our youth. Incidents such as these remind us that there is so much more work to do. So thank you again to John and you, Samantha, for moderating. I think that this is a very appropriate conversation at a time such as this. You're on mute. The statement for 2020 and 2021.
It wouldn't be a Zoom event if I didn't start talking on mute. So I got it out of the way so no one else has to. There we go. But no, truly, thank you so much for those words. Of course, I'm with ABC7. We've been conducting wall-to-wall coverage. And one thing is for sure that this has devastated our city. And if you have seen the video, you know how disturbing, upsetting it is. It took me quite some time to process it. And as you mentioned, it's clear that so much more work needs to be done, starting with resources for young people. And, I know this conversation is going to be important because it kind of goes back to how you build our communities and how you pour into our communities and how we can get to a successful place. So I thank you for those words. And I think it's we will segue into tonight's program, but we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge what's going on today in our city. So thank you. So we are talking about generational wealth, as we mentioned earlier. It's a timely topic because there's increasing recognition of the fact that our country's systems, they are filled with systemic barriers that make it hard for many people that look like us to achieve wealth. So I want to ask you both, what does generational wealth mean to you? Because we've heard the phrase, we've seen it in motivational quotes on the gram, on Facebook, but Mr. Rogers, what does generational wealth mean and look like to you?
Well, thank you. We've done some surveys actually at Ariel over the last 20 years from Charles Schwab, and they're a really extraordinary company looking at how African Americans invest versus white Americans. And one of the things that we talk about there is that how little multi-generational wealth there is in our community. Very rarely do we get inherited wealth. We are traditionally not passing along wealth from one generation to the next. And actually the opposite's often happening, where we're supporting extended families, helping parents and grandparents and others. And we don't have the chance to create the kind of wealth that the white community has been able to do for generations and generations and generations. The other thing that is so important is that, we can't live off dividends. If you think about it, wealthy families that have multi-generational wealth, not only do they, give inheritances to their kids, but the kids are actually living off the dividends of the stocks that were invested in 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 years ago in businesses that were built generations ago. at a time in our country where we weren't allowed to buy property in the parts of our society where real estate values went up. We didn't have a chance to work in the companies and the industries where really wealth was created. So the historical discrimination, the Jim Crow laws, the remnants of slavery have really impacted our ability to have multi-generational wealth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers. And it really does go back decades, hundreds of years. Madam Treasurer, can you weigh in? What does generational wealth look like to you?
Generational wealth to me is exactly the way that it sounds. That sounds so simple, but it really is the way that it sounds. When someone accumulates enough wealth that it outlasts them and they pass it on to their kids and grandkids, that's generational wealth. And you can imagine a family that lives hand to mouth from month to month and never really have enough to put away into savings or investments, as John just spoke about, or even to purchase a home that would appreciate in value over time. It's very hard to accumulate wealth in that situation. But while generational wealth often refers to things like property, stocks, or savings, I think that we can broaden that conversation to include something just as important, and that's home ownership. And so I think tonight, the reason that I was even more excited about this panel with John and I is because John, being the Chief Investment Officer of Ariel, it's amazing how many hats he wears within one company, one organization. But he certainly will always be able to give us the perspective from the investments point of view. And I like the way, when I thought about generational wealth, for me, I wanted to talk about home ownership, because it's not just that, of course, but it's accumulating wealth that requires opportunity. And we know that there's an imbalance of opportunity in our society. I'm reminded of an article I read, I think it was the end of last year, from Washington Post, and it was entitled, "One Home, a Lifetime of Impact." And the article speaks to a Black widowed woman who purchased a home, and it changed the financial wealth for the entire family. And I can bring it home to my personal testimony. My mother was a single mother who purchased her own home. And because I witnessed her do that, Samantha, I did not move out of my mother's home until I purchased my own home. And my mother recently passed away, God bless her soul, but she left her children with an asset. An asset is just that. You use it to make it work for you. And so, John just spoke about in many of our family situations, we're left with liabilities. And so for a loved one to move on and you are left with an asset versus a liability is a very different feeling. That's building generational wealth in its simplest form.
Wow. And so sorry for your loss, Madam Treasurer, but just, the story about how your mother was able to leave you that asset. It's a story that not a lot of us have.
Yes.
Not a lot of us are able to reap the benefits that our parents and grandparents worked so hard for. Madam Treasurer, I'm going to go back to you on this one. Many people see you in our community. They know your face. They know your name. You're, powerful Black woman, and they see you as someone who made it. And for the younger generation out there who might be watching, or people who still want to, they want to excel in their career, they might ask, how did this sister make it? How did you make it? We're born on the South Side, from the West Side. How did this sister make it out? We hear that a lot in our community. So what was that like for you?
And I love that question when you say, how did this sister make it out? I love that question because I'm still here. So, so I don't know if I'm out, but I think that question was so appropriate because that is what we ask. And so I am a young lady that is so proud to be born in Inglewood, raised on the West Side. And to be honest with you, Samantha, I always say that I am an anomaly of elected officials of Chicago because I am a native Chicagoan and I have lived only in underserved communities all of my life. To be born in Inglewood, raised on the West Side, but it certainly has embedded in me the values that it's just, I can't even describe. And so being raised by a single mother of three girls, my mother was a union worker. I watched her, witnessed how she fought for employee rights. I was the first in my family to go to college and obtain my bachelor's degree in finance at Eastern Illinois University. Then after graduation, went on to work over a decade in corporate America. And while working in corporate America, went on to obtain my MBA from Roosevelt University. I loved what I did at the time, but I felt a higher calling. And I knew that my financial security for myself and my family, although it was great in corporate America, it wasn't enough. It wasn't fulfilling enough. So I made one of the best decisions I could have made, and that was to leave corporate America and work for my community, which is why I went on to run for state representative, then became city treasurer. And I think this is an ideal role because it takes my experience in corporate America and my 2 degrees in finance, along with my desire for public service. And I'm able to bring that together and work for the people. And I love doing what I do. And by the way, one last thing, Samantha, when I talk about my humble beginnings, I think that that's important. A lot of times when we talk about generational wealth, and I mentioned my mother leaving an asset to her children, a lot of times in our communities, we feel like that doesn't apply to us. But I just used the perfect example, a single mother, a laborer, a union member, and she left an asset to her family. It certainly can be done.
Absolutely. And Mr. Rogers, what about you? We just talked about this notion of making it out. Do you see yourself in that light? And if so, like, what was your journey to get to where you are today?
Well, I was very, very, very fortunate. I had very different parents. My dad was a Tuskegee Airman, a fighter pilot in World War II and flew over 100 missions. He came to Chicago at age 12, 13, because both of his parents had died by that time. And so he was an orphan along with his sister. And he came to Chicago to stay with an uncle. So his story was really up against all kinds of odds. And he used the GI Bill from being a Tuskegee Airman to pay for law school. And he felt like if the government was going to pay, he wanted to go to the best law school in the country. And he decided that was the University of Chicago, where he met my mom on the first day. So my mom had a completely different experience. She'd gone to Oberlin College. Her father had gone to Oberlin. Her grandfather had gone to Oberlin. Her grandfather had the Stratford Hotel that was burned down in the Tulsa race riots. And he had been a very, very successful entrepreneur before that happened. Her father was a very, very successful lawyer and actually used his legal skills on the famous Hansberry versus Lee Supreme Court case around restrictive covenants. So I just tell that little story is to say that I came from these really completely different families. My father came to Chicago, was very poor, orphaned, and made it because of the GI Bill and his willingness to serve in World War II. And my mom had a very privileged background with father and grandfather who were lawyers and had been very, very successful in their careers, even though my great-grandfather's was derailed by those race riots that destroyed all of his properties. So I had this advantage. My mom was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School. And she really showed me that anything was possible, And then my dad decided that at age 12, I was going to get stock certificates instead of toys. And I fell in love with the markets. And it was just, he introduced me to his stockbroker, who was the first African-American stockbroker on LaSalle Street, Stacey Adams, who became my role model. So I went off to Princeton. I played basketball there for the Hall of Fame coach, Pete Carrill. But he made it clear that I didn't have a future in basketball. So fortunately, I had this other hobby, which was the stock market, and that I loved. And so when I came I followed I followed the footsteps of my mentor and became a stockbroker and became the first African-American to work at William Blair, our regional investment banking firm here in Chicago. And I was there for two and a half years and then left to start Ariel 38 years ago, where we were the first African-American owned money management and mutual fund company in the country's history. But I never would have had the confidence to do that if my father hadn't exposed me to the markets at an early age. And my mom hadn't had confidence that, anything was possible if you worked hard enough. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. You touch on that exposure, and Madam Treasurer, you did as well. Your mother exposed you to the importance of home ownership. Mr. Rogers, your father exposed you to the importance of finances and getting you stock instead of toys. But what do you say to the families, the single moms, the single dads, or the two-parent homes that they feel like I want to get my kid involved in that? That's what I want my son to be similar to Mr. John Rogers or Madam Treasurer, but I don't know about finances. I don't know a thing about stock. I don't know a thing about home ownership. I wouldn't know the first thing. I don't know how to buy a home. How can I teach my kids how to do this if I have no clue, no idea what it is, how to do it, how to pursue it?
Well, it's really, really, really hard. And, and what I start with is I always tell people, public schools should be teaching kids about the stock market, teaching kids about real estate investing, teaching kids about the magic of compound interest and thinking about investing over the long term. And every public school should have robust, financial literacy efforts. You probably know that roughly 25 years ago, when Secretary Arne Duncan was working at Ariel, we created a small public school called the Ariel Community Academy. It's at 46th and Greenwood. It's about 500 African-American students. And we give the kids real money to invest in real stocks using my dad's model. And when the kids graduate in 8th grade, they get to share a portion of the profits. And if they put the money into a 529 program, we'll match it with $500. So the kids will have benefited not only from their investments growing, but also the added cushion that we add to add to the pot. And because of the work that we did there, President Obama asked me to chair his task force on financial literacy for young Americans. And one of the things in our final report to the president, we said, how can we find ways to encourage all financial services companies to partner with urban public schools the way that we did? Because not only are you teaching the kids the basics of the markets, but you're also showing people that look like them that are in financial services careers that are often very lucrative. And then partly to your question, one of the things that Melody and I have noticed is that once you start teaching the kids about the stock market, they go home and teach their parents about what they learned during the day. And that's kind of backwards of what you'd expect, but that's what we find that really works.
I love that, because my question was, how do you teach the parents? But conversely, the students are teaching their parents themselves and showing them the ropes. And I would think that might even inspire them to want to learn more. So what is my kid talking about with these stocks? Madam Treasurer, can you kind of touch on how we get our students, our children, and our parents exposed to financial services and finance in general?
I think tonight is a perfect example of how do we do that, which is why I am so dedicated to it, to be honest with you, as the treasurer, because I think that when a lot of people hear the title as treasurer, they automatically know that it deals with money, but they don't know necessarily the extent of it. And so I want to make it my business. I call it my road show, how I want to talk about the financial services industry. And you will be, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but how many young people that I meet on the south and west sides of Chicago that have not even heard of the financial services industry. And so it doesn't really surprise me, because again, I grew up in these communities and I know that it's very difficult to be what you cannot see. And sometimes you can't even imagine it. So kids in these communities have not met a stockbroker, accountant, or CFO, right? And so they may not have met a John Rogers. And so we start by really just talking about it to raise awareness. And when I tell young people from the south and west sides of Chicago that there is over $69 trillion in assets under management in the financial services industry, you should see their eyes, right? Even my eyes get big. Trillion? And I tell them, I say, the money that you see out here is minuscule compared to what you can make in the financial service industry. So what am I doing when I do that? I'm planting the seed. Now they will go back, look it up, and inquire more into the industry, possibly pursue it, just because we've made them aware. And then I think about examples like John just spoke about, how Melody and him, how they have just worked so diligent. I mean, over 30 years, John has been investing in young people. And if we can get more of John Rogers, which is why I'm always connecting to him and partnering with him, I want more financial service professionals to see what he's doing and want to partner. Internship programs are very important. And certainly we have to do more. And John, he spoke a little bit about what he has done, but he was a little modest about the number of people that have worked for him and went on to start their own firms, minority individuals. That's what we want, right? That's what we want. We want to create others. We're happy to have John Rogers and Melody Hobson, but they can't be the only ones. And so how are we creating more?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that. We are proud of folks who have left Ariel and are doing really, really well. Just actually was reading about one guy, Eric McKissick, who helped found Channing and Company, one of the second largest African-American owned money managers in Chicago. And he just got on his a big corporate board today, it was announced. And so I'm really proud of Eric and his leadership, and he can take our values and help lead now on a national board that he just joined. And as we mentioned the other day, that top 2 African-Americans that are at Northern Trust Bank, 2 on the first 2 ever to be on the management committee at Northern Trust Bank, top 10, they both started as summer interns at Ariel. So Shundron Thomas and Jason Tyler, we're just so proud of watching their leadership, because they're just doing extraordinary things. That there's just many, many other examples like that we are proud of.
Awesome job. And, just being in the area of Ariel, I know students who have gone through the program, and we need like 100, 200, 300 Ariels all across the city teaching kids about finance. So you both are doing amazing work. This question is kind of off the cuff, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, just because in my work, I get so many calls. So I'm a consumer reporter for the morning show. So I take on all types of different stories regarding finances and money trouble. I've gotten so many calls from people who are on unemployment, who are struggling to get unemployment benefits, who are in need of rental assistance. Some people have called me in tears. Samantha, I'm a single mother, 5 kids. I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this hole. So for people who are in this situation, in large part due to the pandemic, they might be watching us right now and saying, I'm trying to dig out of this hole. There's no way I'm going to make it to this point or even come close. How do people navigate this pandemic to get closer to not just financial literacy, but getting out of the debt that they're in? Some people are feeling helpless right now. And quite frankly, they might say, this is just out of my reach. What do you say to those people, Mr. Rogers?
I was going to say the treasurer, I think, is really the expert on that area, because I know that there are programs that I know she has championed. So maybe I'll turn it over to her to answer that one.
Certainly. I'm excited about the question, because tomorrow's panel, and I did not even mention that. I know you mentioned it early on, Samantha, but tomorrow's panel is specific to rental and mortgage assistance, specific to that at 12 noon tomorrow. So please join in. But I'll give you a little hint before then, as far as the answer to your question. I think that, first of all, many residents in our community, we feel like we are the only ones struggling. I don't know why we feel that way. Well, maybe because that's all we know. And so we are not necessarily proactive in advocating for ourselves. By that, I mean, we are kind of intimidated about calling those bill collectors, calling the landlord, calling the lien holder, if you have a mortgage, and saying, hey, what type of payment plans are available? Now, what's the most important of all of this is calling before you fall behind. Not after, right? Not to say that it can't be done, but you lose sort of your leverage. And so we have to be proactive and not be intimidated. And one other thing that I want to mention And I say this all the time, when you do call those collectors before you fall behind, please do not commit to a payment plan that you know you cannot afford. Sometimes we're intimidated and we think that we have to take whatever they're offering. Be honest. Tell them what you can afford so that you don't dig yourself in a bigger hole. And finally, I just want us to understand that we are not the only ones that are like this. People all over the city and all type of neighborhoods, affluent neighborhoods, underserved communities have financial struggles. This pandemic has taken effect on many people. So please don't feel that you're alone and it's just you.
Thank you so much for those words. And for those who are having issues with rental or need rental assistance or mortgage assistance, please be sure to tune in tomorrow. So thank you. That was we call that in news a tease. So that was a good tease, but no, truly,
yes, thank you.
Truly, folks should. I'm actually kind of peeking in the chat room a little bit, and that particular, what you just mentioned, that particular topic is resonating with people a lot. I see a lot of people weighing in on that. So I thank you all. Keep the questions and keep the questions coming because we are going to address some of those. Mr. Rogers, you talked about your work with Ariel and making sure that you're pouring into our community, exposing young people to the financial services industry. Why is it so important to do that? And why do you think more companies aren't doing it?
Well, there's a couple of things there. Because we were not allowed, because of, again, the historical discrimination and racism in our society, we weren't allowed to create the kind of wealth that needs to be managed. You don't need a wealth advisor if you don't have a lot of wealth, right? So we have not been exposed to this industry the way white America has. And those of us that have had some level of success in education, we've always been taught, you become a teacher, you become a doctor, you become a lawyer, and those are the fields where you go to. So those of us who've been able to sort of get going are often pushed into that direction and not thinking about careers in financial services. And then secondly, because we don't have a wealthy family and friends, a lot of financial services companies are not interested in hiring us because we can't bring in clients. It's hard to be an investment banker if you don't have a Rolodex full of CFOs and CEOs you can talk to. Again, it's hard to be a financial advisor or a stockbroker if you don't have families with multi-generational wealth that you have on your, that you can call. So it's really, we've just not had the opportunities and equal opportunities to benefit from the financial services industry that's been one of the most explosive wealth building opportunities in our country's history. If you look at today in Chicago, the wealthiest person in Illinois is Ken Griffin, right? He just named the science industry. They just named the Science Industry Museum after him. He's worth over $15 billion. He makes over $1 billion, $2 billion a year, each and every year. He's in hedge funds. Most of us have never been exposed to hedge funds. We don't know about careers in hedge funds. During the financial crisis, there was a guy named John Paulson and Company. During the worst year of the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 period, he made over $5 billion in 1 year. $5 billion in 1 year. Again, and then the private equity guys. There are so many of them, like Bruce Rauner was in private equity, billionaire. JB Pritzker is venture capital. Of course, he multi-generational wealth there, but venture capitalists often get wealthy. So we are not steered toward these careers, not been given equal opportunities to be successful in these careers where so much of the wealth's being created today. We don't even know what we're missing out on. We don't know what we're being left out of. So I think that's one of the things that we have to do is just, those of us that are in these roles of leadership have a responsibility to out these white institutions that are not including us in the parts of the economy where the wealth's being created today. And, I just can't overemphasize how important that is. Sometimes, last thing I'll say, a lot of us sit on nonprofit boards, universities, hospitals, museums. They always do what they call supplier diversity and work with firms in construction and catering. That's important. Those are valued careers and valued jobs. But we also deserve the opportunity, again, to be the investment banker, to be the private equity person, to be the venture capitalist, to be the lawyer for these institutions. And that's why it's so important that we have leaders like the treasurer who fights for African-American financial services companies to have a chance to do business with the city of Chicago and the institutions that she has a say over how decisions are being made. but her kind of leadership is very, very rare.
Absolutely. And you kind of touch on my next question. It's a good segue. Connections in the city and beyond. I've got a few people that I know, friends, colleagues, people that I know in passing. They are in finance, or they have degrees in finance, and they are trying to break into higher roles. But they feel like, because I'm not a part of this, boys club, I'm not a part of like the institution or the establishment, I will never become a CEO. I need to stay in my lane because I'm a Black person. I'm a person of color. I don't have the connections to ever become a CEO or get that seat at the table. How do you break into that? How do you break through those barriers? And Madam Treasurer, I'd love for you to weigh in on this as well.
First, I want to say you would be surprised at how many financial services jobs there are, and not always necessarily in investments. I was just talking to a young male the other day, a young Black male, and he has a degree in finance. And we were talking about a position that was available in the Department of Aviation, a financial analyst position, for example. And I encouraged him to go to cityofchicago.org and look under the careers. And he was like shocked, like, oh my gosh. And I was like, and it's a lot of departments. You think about the Department of Finance. Department of Finance has a lot of financial positions that are available. Even beyond that, let me say this. And John was so kind when he spoke about my advocacy for minority-owned firms. I think fighting is the right word that I do within my office, within the pension funds. As the only elected official that sits on all 4 pension funds, I feel like it is my duty to advocate for Black and Brown, my duty. And it would be a disservice to the Black and Brown owners of these firms for me to not advocate on their behalf. And let me tell you, I've been in office almost 2 years in a few months. And 2 years ago, I tell you, boy, a lot of eyebrows were raised when I started asking those difficult questions. And almost 2 years in, it's a much better environment. People know that when you come before the 4 pension funds of Chicago, that if you do not have minority representation, you certainly need to have a good answer, because I'm going to ask that question. I'm not afraid to, right? We have to be unapologetic when it comes to advocating for each other. So I would say to that person, and I know that John can speak to this because this is what he does every day. He just spoke about 3 or 4 people right off the cuff that worked for him and now own their own firms. And he spoke about the success of those individuals. And so when people think that they can't, they can. But I would encourage them, tap into a good mentor. Mentorship is very important. And when you tap into that mentor, don't be afraid to receive the knowledge. And I would say, certainly don't be afraid. John just mentioned himself. When he started Ariel, I think he said over 38 years ago, he was working for a financial services investment organization, and he left and started his own firm. Look at Ariel. Oh my God. So, I mean, just success stories within itself. And I don't want us to think it's not within our reach, because this is not a story you read in a book. This is firsthand.
And I was going to add something to this, because I appreciate those comments, Treasurer. I think in part of this, the media's place too, as well as our civil rights leaders. We have to expose these financial services companies that are not hiring us. And example I give all the time, I remember when Governor Quinn was running against Bruce Rauner in the governor's race. We all remember that. I think it was at the DuSable Museum. There was a debate, and Bruce Rauner was giving Governor Quinn a hard time about the fact the state of Illinois wasn't spending enough money with Black businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But the natural fallback question should have been, or the response should have been, well, Bruce, you've mentioned the fact that you have funded 400 companies through your private equity company, GTCR. 400 companies you've helped to finance, help them grow, help them go public. Of those 400 companies, how many of the CEOs, CFOs, and general counsels are Black? I've never met anybody. It's going to be some rounding error. Then if each of those companies has 7 board members, let's just say, That's 2,800 board seats. At the time of that governor's race, I had never met one African-American that had ever been on one of Bruce Rauner's company boards. Now, and I'm like, you said earlier, I know a lot of people. Melanie and I are pretty connected around Chicago, but no one had qualified to be on one of his boards. Now, I'm sure there's some exception somewhere. But if you look at the private equity industry, where so much wealth created today, where so many of the billionaires are, you pull back you peel back the onion, and you see very, very few of us working for those companies. You see very few of us in the companies that they invest in, and you see very few of us on the boards. And so that kind of stuff, that kind of information has to be exposed. I have a friend, Gabby Sulzberger, who is former chairman of Whole Foods and is on the board of MasterCard and on the board of the Ford Foundation. She is just getting data now, just that's going to expose the top 18 private equity firms in the country and how little diversity there is in those companies. And again, I know a lot of us don't know about private equity, but it's just so unfair that we're not allowed to participate in those parts of the economy where so much of the wealth is created today.
And Samantha, I know we have to go on, but this is such a hot topic for me, being the trustee on all four of the pension funds, because when you spoke about $9 billion approximately in the pension funds, you think about that. That's a lot of money. And you think about the people that we're doing business with, asset managers coming before the funds. And you know what? I've always been taught, my mother say, you pay the cost to be the boss. So if I'm sitting there with the $9 billion leverage, I'm going to ask some questions that I feel like I can ask. And so what I have found, and I to be honest with you, it was shocking for me to walk into these pension fund meetings and see the dollar amount transactions we're doing with no minority representation. And so and one thing also that I noticed is that companies will come before us and they'll give you a blanket diversity chart to say, we have 25% minorities. And I'll say, I need you to break it down for me a little bit further. And when I get that information, I see Black and Hispanic is so minuscule. Sometimes it's not even 1% combined.
Right.
So when I ask the question of, talk to me about your plan for Black and Hispanic hiring specifically, you would be amazed at how many people will say, we just can't find the talent. Oh my gosh. And I would cringe. And so I challenge them and I say, you need to talk to me about what your plan is, because they're out there and it's not good enough to say you can't find them.
And, I think there was, I don't want to misquote or pinpoint the wrong CEO. There was a big time CEO of I want to say a financial institution, who came out saying, someone asked why there weren't more executives of color, and this CEO of a financial institution said, we can't find the talent. The talent just doesn't exist. And it's baffling, especially, I'm sure you all who are here and you see African Americans, people of color all the time who are qualified and know of people. But yeah, very disturbing remarks when you hear that. But that's why we're doing panels like this today to
I'm sorry, to be a quick follow-up on that, because you brought that point up. It was Charlie Scharf at Wells Fargo, and they're in the process now of doing better. I mean, they were embarrassed by that data and his comments. They were very much embarrassed by his comments. But I would just say quickly, at Princeton, where I love Princeton, Melly and I, both went there. I used to be on the investment committee. So they started to ask all the money managers that work for Princeton's endowment, that's tens of billions of dollars in their endowment, about the diversity of the teams on the Princeton relationship. Well, they found out there were 270 individuals who worked for the firms that manage Princeton's money that made over $1 million a year. 270 people that made over $1 million a year. There were 30 were women, one was African-American, and one was Latino. Now, they brag about the fact that 17% of the student body is Black and brown. But they had one person out of 270 Black, one person out of 270 brown. And to the treasurer's point, if all the anchor institutions in our community told these big private equity firms and outside money managers that they had to look like America and share the values of the institutions they work for, that would change automatically. Because if the customer demands it, and all the customers demand it, then those institutions have to change their behavior.
Absolutely. Madam Treasurer, I'm going to send this question to you. So last year on Juneteenth, you announced the creation of the Advancing Equity in Banking Commission, which was huge, a commission of major bank CEOs who have agreed to come together to study the roots of systemic racism in banking and propose solutions to address them. So can you talk about what you feel is the responsibility of the banking industry to address these barriers and break these barriers for people of color?
So last summer, during the height of the pandemic, WBEZ released a shocking report that shows that lenders have invested more in a single white neighborhood than in all the Black neighborhoods combined. It found that for every dollar that banks loaned in Chicago's majority white neighborhoods, they loaned just 12 cents in the Black neighborhoods and 13 cents in the Hispanic neighborhoods. Now, people in the city's Black and brown neighborhoods are faithfully paying up to $1,500, even more a month on rent that could just as easily go toward a mortgage and earn them home equity, develop assets, build generational wealth. And so I had a conversation with State Treasurer Michael Ferrix, and I was so happy that he shared my passion and that he shared my concern, and we partnered together to launch the Advancing Equity and Banking Commission. We're coming up on a year this Juneteenth. It's been very difficult forming a commission, trying to work it during a pandemic, but we have been diligent. We have CEOs of 9 major banking institutions of Chicago, and we know that there is a responsibility for our banking institutions. And so we're looking forward to some work coming out of this. Matter of fact, we were talking today, I just got off the phone with State Treasurer Ferrix about how we're going to report out on some work that we have done over this past year. But my feeling is this: a lot of companies today, especially today, like to talk about social justice. But if you're going to talk the talk, you better be prepared to walk the walk. And I tell you, our communities need real action and not just words.
Madam Treasurer, you bring up a good point, because I feel like this is something that we've been talking about in the community over the last several months. And I want to ask both of you, a friend of mine recently said, it's really cool to be Black these days. Everybody wants in on what we've got going on because it's making them look good. Does it frustrate you when you see companies come out of the woodwork with their, social justice platforms and their, commercials, and we're seeing more people of color on the screens promoting their products and their social media posts? Is it a positive? I mean, I guess it would naturally be a positive thing, but is there anywhere in that makes you upset or feel almost used? Because these are the kind of conversations that I have with people in our community. Some people feel used and upset and ticked off.
Well, I get very, very angry and heartbroken because, my father always brought me up that you live up to the commitments that you make to others. And so many of these anchor institutions in our communities have made public commitments to work with minority firms and to hire minority folks. But then when you look and see, there's no one in their C-suite, no one on their management committee that looks like us. You'll see when they spend money on the professional services and financial services, still goes to white men. And maybe they let us go and do the supply chain work, which is important. But I say it's a modern day Jim Crow. The Black and brown people only can do business with the lowest margins are. And the white men get the opportunities where the real profits and high margins are. And so it's just, what we look at the data here in Chicago, 20 years ago, 3 of the top 150 privately held companies, according to Crain's, were African-American owned. 3 out of the top 150. Today, it's 0 of the top 150 companies that are privately held in Chicago are African-American owned. We've gone dramatically backwards, and we've lost Johnson Publishing. We've lost Johnson Products. We've lost Independence Bank. You go down the list, all of those anchor institutions are gone. And, it's just, so I get so angry when people talk a good game, but actually don't do anything to really change the economic opportunities for all of us. Dr. King always said that white Americans deplore prejudice, but accept or ignore economic injustice. And that's what we're having happen here. Now, we have some examples of people doing the right thing. McDonald's does a great job. Exelon does a great job. University of Chicago's done extraordinary work in this area, but it's too few and far between.
And Madam Treasurer, how do you feel about the social justice movement? We're seeing so many companies get on board, but there are people in our community who feel that it's either too late or it's disingenuous.
Yeah, of course they feel that way because of the struggle that has existed for decades, neglect, decades. And so when all of the recent awareness to racial injustice, it's no surprise to families on the south and west sides of Chicago, right? Let's just keep it real. It's no surprise. This is what they've been experiencing all of their lives. And so while we can appreciate the awareness of racial injustice, we just feel that if you are really serious about it, as we say, please don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. We want to see a substantial and tangible difference, because what a lot of people do, and here's one thing I just want to say before we close. This is one thing that bothers me. I see people and they'll say, but I'm going to give money towards this, give money towards that. And all of that is great, right? But I need you to help me to have my own, right? I need you to help me to have my own. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own my own company. And so what you'll say is, I'll help you in this way, but I'm not necessarily going to help you get to where I'm at, right? And so people want to dictate how they're going to spoon feed us. That's frustrating. When I say, no, I'm your equal. Until we get to a point that you see me as your equal, we have a lot of more work to go. And you have to see me as, it's not you're handing me something, but I should have the same opportunity as what you have.
I think that's extraordinarily important point you're making, Treasurer. Very few people understand that. And it's critical. It's part of the reason we are not making the progress that we should. We can just bottle that recipe you just talked about and get that out to these leaders who are making all these decisions.
Yes,
absolutely. Thank you so much for that. It's so important for folks to hear, and we need to continue to talk about it and say it and be bold and fearless and fierce about it, as you both have been. We're approaching our ending time, but we do have some questions from the audience, and I am seeing a trend. So it sounds like, from what I gather, people want to know, what do I do today? What can I do today to start building wealth? One person said, Mr. Rogers, if one wants to make an investment, would you suggest buying stocks, mutual funds, or another type of investment? Another person said, do you recommend middle-class income, less than $75,000 a year, invest in the stock market as a way to help build generational wealth, real estate, such as rental property? So folks want to know, what can I start doing tomorrow, this weekend, first thing Monday morning, to start building generational wealth? And I think folks are looking for a recipe. What can they do? What can you tell them, Mr. Rogers?
Well, it was interesting. The treasurer talked about her mom, left the family real estate, and then she's a proponent that real estate is going to create wealth. And so I know she's ready to talk about that. And again, my dad bought stocks for me, and so I've become a believer in the stock market to create wealth. So I tell people, if you've got the time and energy, and you love the business, love investing, you love thinking about businesses, invest in common stocks and invest in companies that you know and understand and enjoy reading about and studying. And as Warren Buffett, the great investor, always says, invest in your circle of competence. So like for me, I love sports, right? I played basketball in college. A couple of my teammates were running the New York Knicks. So my favorite stock is Madison Square Garden Entertainment, that owns Madison Square Garden. So it's actually both of us. It's real estate. They own the garden and all the land around it in Midtown Manhattan, but they also benefit from people paying to go to the games and sit in the skyboxes and advertise and eat the food and park the cars and all the rest. So I tell people, invest in the stock market, get your feet wet, but invest in businesses you love and understand. Otherwise, you can invest in mutual funds. And again, Ariel was the first African-American mutual fund company in 1986 when our Ariel fund was started. And we're really proud of the fact that it's grown over 11% a year since November of 1986. And we're well ahead of our benchmarks and our competitors over that lifetime period. So mutual funds are great also. And that's kind of what I do for a living, is to pick the stocks for you if you don't have the time or energy or interest in picking stocks yourself.
Let me say this, Samantha. I love these questions because when I was reading them, I was thinking, well, John can't go over all these details, right? It's so many ins and outs to investments. But what's great about it is this interest that has been sparked. And this is what we want, right? And so while you may not leave this call with every answer, because it does depend on the situation, you are going to leave this call with, let me do some research. How can I invest? Or how can I get into this industry, work here? This is great.
It's absolutely fantastic. And Madam Treasurer and Mr. Rogers, you should see the comments, so complimentary. Gosh, one person said this was nothing less than phenomenal. It is such a pleasure to hear everyone's valuable insights. So people are really appreciating what you all have to say. We have another question here. Does Ariel Investments have any resources to learn how to approach markets, investment valuation, and or financial internships, procurement, networking, etc.?
Yeah, well, we do have an internship program. We have 7 or 8, sometimes 9 students every summer. As I mentioned, Melody Hobson started out as a summer intern at Ariel, 33 years ago or something. So it really has worked out extremely well, our internship program. Also, I meet with young people and young investors all the time. People come down to the office. I get on conference calls or Zooms on Saturdays and Sundays and into the evenings. So like the treasurer, we're very approachable and want to be there to help. And we know we can't reach everybody at the Ariel Community Academy or our Rogers Scholars Program at the University of Chicago, where we expose young people to the investment world. But we're just happy to have one-off meetings with whoever would like, or groups, church groups, or have people come down to the office for tours. We just love that.
That's incredible that you are so inviting and allowing the community to come to you with questions. So that's incredible. Madam Treasurer, people know you, they know your face, they know your name. And for many people, you are just the epitome of what a successful, awesome Black woman is. And we know that you do a lot of work in the community. And talk about, to close, how important mentorship is, because we know you do a lot of that and paying it forward. You both have done so much to pay it forward to the community. How significant is that?
I think that mentorship is underestimated, really. I think that our young people, I think they're encouraged by it. I think that it helps them. And I have mentored, even before becoming an elected official, I mentored high school girls to talk to them about the financial service industry, to talk to them about corporate America. Sometimes you don't know what to do on the interview. You may not necessarily know what questions to ask. I think that mentorship is so important. And by the way, even as city treasurer, I have mentors. I have women, Black women, and women of other nationalities that I go to and I speak to about difficult situations. At the end of the day, Samantha, I have learned in this life, you cannot live it alone. And also I have learned that you have to trust someone. I know my husband's probably laughing because I'll tell him you can't trust anybody in politics. However, you have to trust someone. And so please don't bear these burdens alone. I love what I do. John loves what he does. Melody loves what she does. Samantha, you rock. When we look at you, you're a young Black woman working for the largest media in Chicago's market. I'm telling you, the sky is the limit. And what I want these young people to see, and their parents that are watching this tonight, look at us. Look, don't tell me that it's not possible. Hyde Park, Inglewood is possible.
Thank you so much. Those are such kind words. You have me blushing over here. We are at 7, but final thoughts, final remarks. If there's anybody who is feeling defeated, feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but feeling a glimmer of encouragement, what are your final words to get them over that hump and get the ball rolling, so they can be on their way to generational wealth?
And I want you to conclude with this, John. I just want to say this. I know that there were so many questions about the rental and mortgage. Please chime in tomorrow. Although, you know, home ownership for me, as John said, I believe that's a way to build generational wealth and the easiest way to build it. But I'll say this, we know the challenges. It's not easy owning your own home. It's not easy. We know that not only with the lien holder, with PMI, we also know with property taxes, it's not easy. I'll say this though, even as a renter, believe me, the homeowner is passing all of those fees over to you as a renter. So either you're paying for it as a homeowner yourself or you're paying for it as a renter. And I just encourage people, we're going to do this together. There's more to come. So please don't be discouraged. Absolutely. Go ahead, John. I want you to answer her question on the way out.
Rogers.
Okay, well, just a couple sentences. One, I would just say is that we have a program now at the University of Chicago for minority students to get paid internships to work in the investment offices of major endowments throughout the United States. And we've had 64 people go through the program. We're increasing the program in the coming years. We've had one of the graduates coming to work for us full time. The reason I mention that is I said earlier, too many times our kids and our grandkids and our nieces and nephews haven't been exposed to all aspects of the financial services industry. So my hypothesis is that we've got to get young people exposed to understanding all about private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, international and global investing, all the different aspects of that. Because if you're going to work really hard and go to a great school, you deserve to make as much money as the white guys do, or more, because we're more talented, we work harder, we've overcome more obstacles in this country. So we got to be able to force them to hire us. So we got to get our young people prepared for these financial services careers early. And then hopefully 10 years from now, our kids and our grandkids will be off to the races, fully participating in the parts of the economy they deserve to participate in.
Absolutely. It starts with the youth. Mr. Rogers, Madam Treasurer, thank you all so much. This has been just absolutely incredible. I mean, the highlight of my day, likely week, month, all of that. And I'm just in seeing the comments. You all have been such a great help to so many people. I did have a few people asking about the events tomorrow and Saturday. That's a great sign. So please visit www.chicagocitytreasurer.com/Money Smart Week. Again, my name is Samantha Chapman. You can catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, ABC 7 Chicago. And again, thank you all. Have a great evening.